coming up on a newscast. A team of local and foreign experts conducted a year-long investigation into the 2017 Pohang earthquake, the second strongest in the nation's modern history. They found out that a geothermal power plant in the region caused a tremor. Pyongyang's ambassadors to China, Russia, and the United Nations are suddenly called back home. Some watchers say they may have been gathered to discuss tactics on nuclear negotiations with the U.S. and ways to deal with international sanctions. Statistics Korea reports the number of people getting married here in the nation has dipped to the lowest level since they began gathering relevant data. This is mainly due to youths postponing or giving up on tying the knot due to economic challenges. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Choi. An investigation was carried out to find out the cause of the earthquake that hit Pohang back in 2017. The team concludes it was triggered by a geothermal power plant. Cha Sang-mi has our top story.
On November 15, 2017, residents of the city of Pohang had to evacuate as aftershocks from Korea's second-largest earthquake on record shook their port city, some 370 kilometers southeast of Seoul. At magnitude 5.4, the shaking destroyed thousands of homes and injured dozens of people, the estimated damage reaching nearly $75 million. The results of an investigation revealed Wednesday that the quake was probably or almost certainly anthropogenically induced, that is, caused by humans. To blame, it said, was a local geothermal power plant. The year-long study by a team of local and foreign experts led by the Geological Society of Korea concluded that the series of quakes was triggered by excavations at the plant that started in 2015.
A series of micro-sized earthquakes occurred when fluids were injected in the process of excavating a geothermal well at the power plant, which eventually triggered the Pohang earthquake.
The geothermal power plant works by drilling 4 to 5 kilometers deep to tap into heat from the earth and injecting high-pressure water deep into hot rock. During the process, the force of the water carves new fissures into the rock and absorbs heat, after which the hot water is pumped up to the surface, where as steam it turns turbines. The geologists claim that by weakening the ground, water infusion can cause seismic activity. Local citizens plan to sue the government for compensation and to demand that it close the plant. The plant had been temporarily shut down since last March during the assessment. To this, the government pledged to spend more money to make the area safe again.
In cooperation with Pohang, we will permanently suspend the project to commercialize geothermal development. And after discussing it with experts, we will restore the land as fast as possible so that safety is also restored.
As for who's to pay for the earthquake damage, Chung said the government will abide by what the courts rule. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
The National Assembly continued its interpellation session focusing on foreign affairs, unification, and security. Areas of debate included North Korea's sincerity for denuclearization, as well as Seoul's stance on Pyongyang following the Hanoi summit. Kim Min-ji has more from Parliament.
Topping the agenda at Wednesday's parliamentary Q&A session was North Korea's denuclearization. The main opposition Liberty Korea party questioned whether North Korea is sincere about giving up its nuclear weapons, citing a lack of concrete action during the past year. They said it seems rather that the regime is buying time to beef up its nuclear arsenal. They also criticized Seoul's soft stance towards Pyongyang, saying that the no-deal Hanoi summit highlights the need for a new strategy, stressing that now is not the time to be pushing to ease sanctions.
Does this government not have a plan B or C? Aside from getting the sanctions off, does it have any objectives at all?
We are working on the diplomatic front and we have been coordinating closely with the U.S. Although the Hanoi summit ended without a deal, we're drawing up measures to address the changing circumstances, both short and long term.
The ruling Democratic Party brushed off concerns that the talks had completely broken down, saying that both North Korea and the U.S. are leaving the door open for dialogue. They asked whether there was progress in other areas, to which the government said that the two sides had significant discussions about issues like humanitarian assistance and the establishment of liaison offices. The ruling party also highlighted the need for continued efforts to prepare for joint economic projects with North Korea.
Inter-Korean economic cooperation is a must. Together with the South's capital and technology and the North's resources and labor, the Koreas can join the ranks of the advanced countries. Seoul needs to be at the front of the line when Pyongyang opens up its economy.
I think that cross-border economic exchanges could help bring about denuclearization, but they should be pursued in a way that does not hamper international sanctions. Right now, it's possible to seek exchanges in such areas as culture, academia, and sports, so there is a need to focus on those.
Lawmakers also voiced concerns that Seoul is compromising its security by scaling down its joint military exercises with Washington. To this, the Defense Ministry said the country is maintaining military readiness and monitoring any developments in North Korea, adding that if there are signs of nuclear proliferation, it will coordinate with the international community to block it. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
North Korea has not released any reports recently through its propaganda outlets, and in a very rare move, the regime recalled its ambassadors to China, Russia, and the UN. Oh Jung-hee takes a closer look.
Is North Korea reviewing its strategies on nuclear negotiations? Last week, Pyongyang's propaganda outlets released reports almost every day urging the U.S. to change its stance. The reports stressed the regime is still up for complete denuclearization, but called for a multi-phased approach to it, saying there's no better deal than the one it had proposed at the summit. The North further pinned down its position last Friday through a press conference by its vice foreign minister, threatening to end negotiations unless Washington gives in. Since then, the regime has released no reports about denuclearization. With such silence going on for almost a week, Pyongyang's ambassadors to China, Russia, and the UN have all returned to North Korea on Monday. Such trips are quite rare. It is possible that their return is to attend an annual meeting of overseas diplomatic mission chiefs. But some observers point out that the regime could have recalled its envoys to realign its tactics on nuclear negotiations with the U.S. and on how to deal with international sanctions. China, Russia, and the UN all play a key role in UN Security Council discussions on international sanctions.
North Korea is keeping its eyes on the U.S. response and at the same time is looking for ways to deal with it. The regime is refraining from making additional official remarks or provocations.
Since the Hanoi summit, the U.S. has been stressing that it looks to strike a one-shot deal with North Korea, while the North has claimed that the two sides should exchange actions and rewards. With the two sides in a standoff, the North seems to be in an analysis mode, working on strategies. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
The UN Security Council Sanctions Committee on North Korea is to hold a closed-door meeting Wednesday to discuss sanctions on North Korea, including possible tougher measures. Radio Free Asia reported that the committee will be reviewing how UN member states have been implementing the sanctions on the regime, as well as looking at the expert panel report submitted last week. The report said that Pyongyang has been illegally procuring refined petroleum products via ship-to-ship transfers and has been illegally exporting small arms to Syria, Yemen, Libya, and Sudan. The committee will discuss whether to review if additional sanctions need to be made to the sanctions list. It will also reportedly discuss sanctions exemptions for humanitarian aid to North Korea. Pyongyang and Washington have been going at each other over sanctions at the UN headquarters. North Korea claims it has done enough over the past year to have those measures removed. For details, let's turn to our Lee Seung-jae.
At a UN disarmament conference in Geneva on Tuesday, the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Arms Control, Verification and Compliance said the only way for North Korea to achieve security and development is to abandon all of its weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missile programs. She also urged countries to halt any weapons or military cooperation with the regime.
Our stance is unwavering with regard to North Korea. North Korea must understand that the only way to achieve the security and development that it seeks is to abandon all of its weapons of mass destruction. all of its ballistic missile programs as numerous UN Security Council resolutions demand. As numerous UN Security Council resolutions demand.
In response, North Korea said there were no legitimate reasons to maintain sanctions on the regime since it has not conducted any weapons tests for well over a year.
The U.S. publicly recognized the DPRK had discontinued the nuclear test and rocket launch for the past 15 months. However, it does nothing to remove the U.S. sanctions as a corresponding measures. Instead, they came up with a preposterous argument that sanction relief is impossible prior to denuclearization. We found that the U.S. calculation quite odd, and such gangster-like position doubtlessly will drive the situation in danger.
He added the U.S. had promised to take corresponding measures during their first summit in Singapore. Instead, according to Ju, President Trump came up with what he called a preposterous argument that sanctions relief is impossible prior to denuclearization. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
It's clear for North Korea going ahead with nuke tests will not be a very wise move. America's top officials are calling on the regime to make the right decision by keeping its promise to denuclearize. Kim Yo-sun has the full story.
White House National Security Advisor John Bolton admits a new missile or nuclear test by North Korea would have a, quote, real impact on President Trump. Speaking with Fox Business Network on Tuesday, he explained that President Trump has said he would be very, very disappointed if the North resumes testing. Bolton also quoted Trump as saying it was a commitment North Korean leader Kim Jong-un made several times. This is interpreted as a warning that the North's threat to restart nuclear and missile tests could bring about changes in the Trump administration's North Korean policies. Bolton, who has long held hawkish views on North Korea, also said the regime will be granted a bright economic future once it abandons its weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missiles. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has once again stressed the need for verifiable measures for the complete denuclearization of North Korea. Speaking with local media in Kansas on Tuesday, Pompeo said it's time the North Korean leader show action, considering the distrust between Washington and Pyongyang. Such a remark is a reaffirmation of another interview during which he said the U.S. has strong intentions to hold dialogue with the North, only under the precondition that the regime moves first with verifiable steps for denuclearization. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Last month's data showed a rise in employment here in the nation, but President Moon Jae-in says in terms of job creation, the private sector is still falling short. Today, he held a meeting with his finance chief and asked for greater efforts to turn things around. Shin Se-min shares with us what was discussed.
After assessing the state of the domestic economy, President Moon Jae-in has again stressed the need to churn out more jobs. He'd met with Finance Minister Hong Nam-ki about economic conditions, and the president reportedly ordered his top economic policymaker to do his best to create more jobs in the private sector. The presidential spokesperson said the meeting was about the employment situation in the private sector, and that the president said that despite the rise in employment in February, job creation in the private sector is still falling short, and the president had asked the minister to do everything he can to promote innovative growth. Together, the president and the finance chief reportedly went over ways to keep the country's exports and investment from falling behind. President Moon also ordered his economic team to work to revitalize the economy and to improve the job market by making sure that major players in the economy see an improvement in sentiment and achieve results. The president ordered Hong to introduce his new deregulation framework to other ministries, something businesses had demanded earlier this year when they met with the president, because it had been proven to help with breaking unnecessary regulations. Under the new framework, the burden is on the government to prove the need for a given regulation, while in the past, consumers or businesses would have to prove the need to get rid of it. The president had previously expressed the need to develop the country's traditional economic pillar, manufacturing, as a way to revive the economy. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
South Korea celebrated its 46th Commerce and Industry Day by honoring businesses and individuals in the field for their hard work. 190 company leaders receive awards and commendations from the government at a special event in Seoul hosted by the Trade Ministry. The main items produced by these firms include auto parts, chip-making equipment, and electronic components. Trade Minister Song Yun-mo thanked them for their contributions to the local economy and emphasized the importance of increasing investment and branching out to new sectors. The ministry pointed out that many of the winning companies have combined traditional industries with the latest technologies like as AI, which help boost sales. After falling for 4 consecutive months, producer prices in the nation rose slightly last month. The Bank of Korea says the production price index, a barometer of future consumer inflation, edged up 0.1% on month in February. According to the BOK, higher services prices and industrial goods prices like global oil prices and raw materials offset lower agricultural and electronic goods prices. Samsung Electronics is seeking new growth areas in 5G, AI, and other network equipment as sales of its mainstay chips and smartphones begin to fall. In its annual general meeting on Wednesday, the firm's co-vice chair Kim Gi-nam said the tech giant expects a tough year amid slowing economic growth and decreasing demand for semiconductors and vowed to invest in new technologies. Samsung plans to pay $8.5 billion in dividends this year. The tech firm posted $216 billion in sales and $52 billion in operating profits in 2018, thanks to its record chip sales. The U.S. has become the 5th biggest oil exporter to South Korea last year. Our Kim Dami explains why Seoul has been importing more and more American crude.
South Korea was the world's #2 importer of U.S. crude oil in 2018, outstripping China. Last year, South Korea brought in around 61 million barrels from the U.S., which is around 6% of the country's total oil imports. This made the U.S. the 5th largest exporter to Korea after Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, and the United Arab Emirates. From 2017, South Korea's imports of American crude began to grow sharply because of price competitiveness. While prices of oil produced in the Middle East rose last year due to U.S. sanctions against Iran, U.S. crude became cheaper as the country increased its shale oil production.
One main reason is that the price gap between Dubai crude and West Texas Intermediate widened to $8 per barrel last year, which led to local oil companies' preference for U.S. crude oil.
Market observers added that the size of South Korea's oil imports from the U.S. will depend on whether WTI remains significantly cheaper than Dubai crude. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
The official campaigning period for the April 3rd by-elections kicks off tomorrow. For 13 days, candidates will be able to reach out to voters in a variety of ways and sell their policy pledges to the public. This time, 2 parliamentary seats are up for grabs, as well as 3 local councillors' posts. The 2 districts are Changwon and Dongyang, both in the southeast of the country. The seats are vacant following the suicide of a progressive political figure and the conviction of a lawmaker for violating the political funds law. Although it's only 2 seats, it will serve as a litmus test to see public sentiment towards the parties. The K-pop sex scandals involving 2 singers are now entering a different stage. One of them will attend a hearing on his possible arrest tomorrow. Choi Si-young sheds light on the developments from the beginning up until now.
It all started last December with a customer at the Burning Sun nightclub who claimed the club had illicit ties to the police in Seoul's Gangnam district. He said he had been beaten up by club security guards, but then was himself arrested as a criminal suspect. He blamed corruption and pointed to Seung-ri as the club's owner. Public interest in the man's story grew fast, so in January this year, the Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency opened an investigation. Seung-ri denied involvement in the club, but in February, the police raided the club based on intelligence that there was prostitution, rape, and drug use. Officers were also sent to the police substation in Yeoksam, where the club is, to look for evidence of any collusion. In late February this year, Seung-ri was questioned by police as a witness over allegations that he procured the services of prostitutes at the club for his potential business partners. In March, he was charged with soliciting prostitution. The scandal grew when the police got hold of Seungri's mobile chat room in which singer Jung Jun-young is suspected of sharing video clips of sex acts between himself and several women. Jung was charged with illegal filming and distribution. So far, the Seoul Central District Court turned down the request for an arrest warrant in the scandal for the club's official owner, saying the police need to more clearly explain what crime they suspect he committed. Jung will attend a hearing this Thursday on his possible arrest, while Seungri has asked and gotten approval to postpone his mandatory military service while the investigation goes on. On Monday, President Moon told the Minister of Interior and Safety in charge of the investigation to run a thorough probe. The minister gave a press conference the next day, saying the police will exhaust all avenues. 최시영, 아리랑 뉴스.
Financial issues, among other factors, continue to make it more difficult for the younger generation to tie the knot. The number of South Koreans getting married has decreased to the lowest level since the country began collecting related data. Sabobin breaks down the digits for us.
The number of South Koreans getting married has fallen for the 7th consecutive year, reaching a new record low for the first time in more than 40 years. According to Statistics Korea on its 2018 Marriage and Divorce Statistics Report, the total number of couples that got married last year stood at 257,600, a 2.6% decrease from the previous year. This means that only 5 people out of 1,000 people are getting married, which is the lowest rate since 1972. Economic struggles and unaffordable housing are seen as major obstacles for young people to delay or give up getting married. This also showed an increase in the median age of marriage. The average age for men to get married stood at 33.1 years in 2018, compared with 32.9 years in 2017. In the case of women, the average age of marriage stood at 30.4 years in 2018, up from 30.2 years in 2017. As for the number of divorces, it stood at 108,700 in 2018, an increase of 2.5% from the previous year. 서보빈, 아리랑 뉴스.
Staying here in the nation, for this year's Civil Defense Training Day, the South Korean Fire Agency has run a nationwide drill on the streets. This is to raise awareness of the importance of yielding to emergency vehicles. Won Jung-hwan reports.
It's the law and basic driving etiquette that drivers must pull over to let fire trucks through, and pedestrians shouldn't cross the road until the emergency vehicles have passed.
But there have been cases reported where drivers and other obstacles have interfered with firefighters responding to emergencies. In an attempt to raise public awareness and prevent such incidents in the future, a nationwide drill to make way for emergency vehicles took place on Wednesday afternoon. The drill saw 219 fire departments across South Korea send fire engines to 453 locations, with routes including congested roads and other areas with difficult entry points, where the sound of sirens from emergency vehicles should lead to other vehicles moving out of the way. Firefighters say the addition of the program to the country's civil defense training gives them the rare chance to actually do training operations on congested city streets.
It is rare to actually train in the city center where it is congested like here. That is why we need to ask people to move out of the way, just like in a real situation, to actually save people if tragic incidents ever happen.
Drivers who refuse to give way to fire trucks will have to change their ways, as one of the approved revisions last June has raised the maximum fine for such actions from $180 to some $1,800.
It is true that the fines have been strengthened. We also have a strong rule that if a fire truck is ever blocked by an obstacle, that obstacle will be destroyed. All because saving lives is what comes first.
The strengthened laws will ensure firefighters can perform their duties without fear of criminal prosecution or having to pay compensation, so they can concentrate on doing their job, saving people's lives. 원정환, 아리랑 뉴스.
Hello, Michelle Park here with the latest weather update. A storm system is sweeping the country tonight until Thursday morning, and Jeju Island and the southern coastal areas will be hit by a heavy downpour of between 30 and 80 millimeters of precipitation, while the rest of the country will receive between 10 and 60 millimeters, and an occasional gust of wind and lightning will accompany us through the rainstorm, so please stay safe and watch out. Now, the rainy conditions will allow us to breathe some fresh air under cloudy skies tomorrow. Now, also cold winds will start to blow in, so it will get chilly as of tomorrow afternoon. And at the same time, Beijing will be sunny, while Tokyo will feel mild but damp under rainy conditions. Now, tomorrow, Seoul will get up to 9 degrees Celsius, and Busan and Jeju will be higher in the mid-teens. And the afternoon highs across the country will range between 14 and 20 degrees. And on Friday, we are expecting our last cold spell of the season and another round of showers over the weekend. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we could pack into tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Thank you for staying with us.